Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and this video I'm going to be discussing a question that was posed to me about whether Labour would get fully behind rejoining the EU for the next general election, and if not, would they for the election after it? And I'm going to sort of discuss that and how I see the potential path towards rejoining the EU. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So for this one, what we really need to do is consider a few things. First of all, why is Labour not really talking about Brexit at the moment? I have discussed that before, but I want to do that really quickly just to be clear as to why Labour are not taking a position at the moment, because there is a reason. Second of all, to consider what would be the conditions, the circumstances that would allow them to get fully behind rejoining the EU before the next general election, which I don't actually expect them to do, but I'll go through a reason for that. But I do expect them to for the following general election. I'm going to explain the path to that. Now, because we're talking about politics over a significant period of time, quite a long period of time actually, there's an awful lot of ifs and buts about it. So, and I'm going to try and state what those ifs and buts are, because let's say at the start of this year, anyone ever thought that they could predict political events? Surely 2020 has knocked that out of you. We do not even know what's going to happen the next week. So first of all, despite the mess that Boris Johnson is making of Brexit, and you may imagine that this is an easy win for Labour to poke holes at, why is Keir Starmer not doing this? And the answer is quite simply that it is still an extremely polarising issue. Labour at the moment are trying to reverse their fortunes, which they are doing, but I'm going to discuss that in another video today. I either already have or will be doing next. One of the two. And that way, you're trying to focus on what it is that unites people against the government's behaviour. So obviously, very recently, the exams mess was an easy one. COVID, of course, is an easy one. You know, free school meals for kids in poverty is an easy one. Brexit is not an easy one at the moment. Next year, however, when it starts to hurt, I would actually expect before next year, I would expect as we're getting towards the point where Boris Johnson has to announce what is happening with Brexit. Basically, what Keir Starmer doesn't want to do is get himself in the position where people can say that he undermined anything, which had been nonsense anyway as leader of the opposition, but people could still say it. So he's just waiting. As he said in his own words, he's going to let the government own the situation. As soon as the government announce definitively what is going to happen, so towards the end of the year, but not yet, then he may start saying something. But certainly once we start to feel the pain, it'll be like, hang on a minute, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about it? But here's the way I see it. So if Labour were to get fully behind rejoining the EU for the next general election, what circumstances will allow them to do that? Because I'm going to be really clear here, and I'm very happy that the current Labour leadership are fully focused on what is necessary to get elected. Because if you do not get elected to power, it doesn't matter what you say you would do if you had power. All of it is worthless if you do not work towards gaining that power. So if a Brexit position, a rejoining the EU position, is something that would help catapult Labour into power, of course they would do that. If it is not, if it is still too divisive, then of course you would not do that. So it really all depends on how obviously badly will Brexit go. We know Brexit will go badly because it's gone badly enough over the last 4 years. Disastrously. But not in a way that ordinary people can see. Will the same thing be true? You know, it's very difficult to imagine how people won't be able to see the disaster of Brexit. But until we know exactly what sort of Brexit Boris Johnson wants and will deliver us, we do not yet know. And if he is got rid of at some point in the next year or so, and someone takes over, how will they manage it? We do not yet know. So Labour would be foolish to adopt any position at the moment because they do not know whether it's the sort of thing that improves or hinders their efforts to gain power. They must fully focus on getting into government. And given the massive swing that's going to be required to move back towards Labour to do this, you cannot take chances with policies of principle, shall we say, the ones that you really want the party to adopt. But if Brexit goes disastrously wrong. So disastrously wrong that you've actually got people really calling for us to rejoin. And, much more than the million that marched a couple of times last year, you've really got a very clear momentum towards we must rejoin. In that situation, then yes, Labour absolutely could adopt it. But here's the thing. Here's what they more realistically will do. If there's going to be a central plank to the next election, it really needs to be the proportional representation. And then, if Labour do win power, even with a coalition, but preferably power on their own, and they can implement that proportional representation, they will, and I'm certain, will absolutely make it a promise for the next general election. And I want to sort of share something with you. So I worked out, let's say we had effective proportional representation and it had been in place for the last election. So I've got a table here showing different parties. Now you'll notice I've not put on Irish parties. I've left Northern Ireland out largely because the main parties in Britain, largely, certainly that take place, that participate in Great Britain, that's Wales, England, and Scotland, don't really have much input in Northern Ireland, and they don't win seats. With proportional representation, I don't know, maybe one of them would, but so that's why I've removed that. I'm not ignoring Northern Ireland. It's just we're talking, specifically I want to talk about the major parties. So that is, I've reduced it from 650 seats to 628, but that's okay because Boris Johnson wants to reduce it even more. So I looked at the share of the vote and I worked out, and where it says seats, that's how many seats they actually did get with first past the post. New, that column, is how many seats they would have got if we'd have had proportional representation. So you can see with proportional representation, the Conservatives would have gone from 365, a stonky majority, down to 286. Still the largest party. But it's a minority. And if you look at the situation, you could have Labour and the Liberal Democrats alone would equal that. And then if you add on, say, the Green Party, who would have gone from 1 seat to 18 seats, they'd be the big winners. Well, there you've got a coalition that would work towards something like rejoining the EU. Because this is the way I would see it. So let's say you managed to get in proportional representation. And let's say you had a similar... And bear in mind, this share of the vote was an absolute disaster for anyone opposed to the Conservatives. But let's say the same thing happened. Even if Labour didn't win a majority, you would still have a scenario where you would have Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party able to form an effective coalition. I'm leaving the SNP out of it, not out of rudeness, but out of a couple of things. First of all, obviously in any coalition, they'll be angling towards something that moves you towards Scottish independence. You'd always, as a pro-union party, wish not to do that. And the other thing, of course, as you can see, if proportional representation were in place, the SNP, even with their very impressive share of vote, I know it doesn't look impressive when you put it as 3.9%, but that's 3.9% out of the UK. For Scotland, it was, 40-odd%. But that would mean they'd have gone from 48 seats under first past the post, where they absolutely killed it, to 26 seats, much fairer 26 seats in terms of representation. And what that would mean is, I've put on to the right there, you can see Brexit and EU. This is like Brexit parties, which would be the Conservatives and the Brexit Party, who would win seats. I mean, under this system, they'd go from no seats to 13 seats. They would win, you would argue, but in actual fact, they'd still be on the opposition benches. And you would have, in terms of pro-EU parties, 329, that would include the SNP, 329. In a scenario like that, you have a majority in favour of rejoining the EU. But when I sort of also point out that that is based on 2019 voting, in reality, we can see that Labour are already increasing their share of the votes. More people will go out to vote in the next election, surely, if Labour carry on doing what they're doing. And so in actual fact, you would expect the Conservatives to get even fewer seats. Now, obviously, the next election is not going to be under proportional representation. That's why we need Labour to win under first past the post, but then implement proportional representation. Now, if that happened going into the following general election, it will be absolutely clear the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party will be fully on board with joining the EU. In fact, it will be quite clear that under proportional representation, Labour are unlikely, not impossible, but they're unlikely to get an overall majority, which means they will need to form partnerships with other parties. That's what proportional representation does, creates compromise, cooperation. The Liberal Democrats and the Green Party, and, you know, if things are still as they are and we're still in a union, presumably the SNP as well, will be pushing very hard for any cooperation, the price of any cooperation to be rejoin the EU. Labour would not be opposed to this. Labour are a pro-EU party. It's just that unlike those other parties, we have this core. It's a hard, you know, it's a small core, but it's a very vocal core that for some reason, somehow decided that they were anti-EU. And, but, you know, given that the only way to create stable power for a Labour leadership will be agreeing to rejoin the EU, well, they will get fully on board with that. So that is how I would see a more realistic. Now, as I say, there's a lot of ifs and buts here, including Scottish independence, yay or nay, all sorts of things. Whether Labour can actually win the next election, we don't want to take anything for granted. But if that can happen, I can see that as a realistic path within the next 10 years to really laying the groundwork for rejoining the EU, because what I would see then is a situation where if Labour win the next general election, or at least knock the Conservatives out into second placed party, but preferably winning a majority, then at that point they can work on proportional representation and knowing how the electoral picture will look in the next general election, being pro-EU, start to get it into the public debate. We need to rejoin the EU. You could lay the groundwork for that even, and then make that general election a decision to do it, or even hold a referendum. You could hold a referendum in that same parliament, in fact, and then lead the next general election with a promise to actually implement it. So that's what I would see as a more realistic outcome. But let me know your thoughts anyway in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.